So Dr. Shaughnessy, we are so happy to have you here. This presentation is anxiety, understanding it, and stress, and the gifted. And I love your subtitle. I hadn't had that till now. This new normal is not normal. It is anxiety provoking and stressful. Let me introduce you to Dr. Michael Shaughnessy. He's currently professor of special education at Eastern New Mexico University in Portales, New Mexico. He is also currently editor-in-chief of Gifted Education International and has published and presented internationally on gifted, talented, and creative. And we are just so very happy to have you here.
All right, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. When I originally was asked to do this, I started off with this title about quote unquote, this new normal. It's really not normal. We are in a very, very anxiety provoking, very stressful time. Now, it's not as bad as being bombed, for example, in London by the Germans, but it's certainly very anxiety provoking, stressful, and kids don't necessarily have the coping strategies to deal with this. They've never been confronted with it. Teachers haven't been confronted with such a situation. Although I've been doing online teaching for a while, I had to really learn how to do Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all this, and I had to do it real quickly. And I think, wow, we got 26 participants, and that's great. I guess Lori will let them in from the waiting room as they arrive. So thank you. I'm going to kind of get started and walk you through this. Just some words now being heard about this quarantine, and it looks like we're going to be under quarantine. I have, associates and colleagues up in Albuquerque and Santa Fe, and unfortunately, the numbers of positive COVID individuals seems to be increasing. So in a sense, this is a kind of what we call stress inoculation for parents that this is probably going to continue into January and February. When this first started back in March, we thought, well, gee, this will all be over by the 4th of July. And unfortunately, it's not. And it looks like it's going to continue through Thanksgiving and into Christmas and next year. But the main words that you probably have thrown about or heard are stress. We're thrown into a situation of chaos. Not everybody has internet access. In fact, when Suddenlink crashed, I drove over to one of the school districts to try to use their internet access to make sure that I would be able to present at 11 o'clock. So it was very stressful for me and, my blood pressure. So, and kids are thrown into a situation of confusion. When is this going to be over? You know how their little minds work. And I'm going to talk about the minds of gifted kids and how those little minds work also. But they're in confusion. They want structure, consistency, and routine. And what are we giving them? We're giving them chaos, which is not good. Okay. I talk to parents and teachers, and they throw out these words, topsy-turvy. Some of these kids that I've talked to, they think that this is the end of the world, that we're all going to die, that there's this epidemic, and they call it a pandemic. The problem is a kid that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, they don't know the seriousness of this. They see everybody wearing these masks, and all of a sudden the world is thrown into chaos. And this is something that they've never been confronted with before. So this is really cataclysmic for a lot of people, for a lot of teachers, even at the university. When we were thrown into totally online, it was pretty difficult for us to adjust. You have people talking about it's terrible, awful, horrible. They can't get into the restaurant. I mean, I couldn't get into the bank. I had to do the drive-through, kind of using McDonald's on and off to eat because you can't get into restaurants. Unfortunately, things have, for some people, been thrown into a shambles of chaos where we're riding by the seat of our pants, etc. That this is a kind of foreign thing that we've never been confronted with before. And I often use one of the terms from one of those Avengers movies. Some of you may have seen the Avengers movies. And some of you may have the access to raise your hand or thumbs up or something like that. So you may remember that one of the lines from one of the Avengers movies, "This is nothing that we have ever been trained for." How many remember that one? You don't remember that cultural reference? Okay. But in one of the movies, one of the characters says, "This is nothing we were ever trained for." And I'm pretty sure that there was nothing in some of your teacher ed programs that prepared you for anything like this. And the problem with gifted kids is that all of the emotions that parents and adults and teachers are experiencing are being communicated to children and adolescents. Those kids, your students, your children are picking up on whatever you're feeling. If you're feeling agitated, if you're feeling stressed out, they're picking up on this because they are emotionally sensitive. One of the things about gifted kids, if you study Dabrowski, is that they are more attuned, sensitive, particularly to your subtle nuances. Okay, so this is what you need to understand, particularly about gifted kids. They're picking up on whatever grief, aggravation you're feeling, whatever tension you're feeling, they're picking up on those emotions. And really a very, very bad kind of statistic is divorce is up 34%, which is an astounding kind of statistic. I don't remember where I got it from, but I think it's probably representative. And what happens is those students, children are in the middle of this. They're in the middle of this kind of chaos. They're in the middle of the stress between mom and dad. Now, anxiety. I want to talk a little bit about anxiety. When kids are anxious, particularly gifted kids, they may not know how to put their feelings into words. For this reason, it's important that you guys know how to recognize what we call the signs and symptoms of anxiety. And here are some common indicators that a child might be anxious or preoccupied with this entire quarantine and COVID-19 thing. You'll see changes in eating and sleeping habits. I'll talk a little bit later about sleeping because I know a little bit about sleep. And also, I even know a little bit about the EEG waves of gifted kids when they are sleeping. You may not be aware of this, but the brain waves of your gifted kids are different, even when they're asleep, than students that are intellectually deficient or even average. Okay, so I have a little bit of experience. I used to work in a sleep disorders clinic. So we know a little bit about what's going on. And when the sleep is disrupted, that causes some stress and agitation. Number two, bouts of unexplained crying. The kid just bursts out crying because they may be frustrated. We're going to talk today about LFT, low frustration tolerance. A lot of these kids have low frustration tolerance, and it's somewhat understandable because they're put in this very difficult situation. Now, I'll give you my email later if anybody really wants to get a copy of this so we can send it out to you. Big problem, complaints of stomach aches, psychosomatic kinds of problems. Some kids will struggle to concentrate because they're worried about their friends. They're worried about their aunts, their uncles that they haven't seen. Some children will appear more clingy than normal. They will want this reassurance. We'll talk about that later, about how to kind of reassure kids that things will hopefully get better. I mean, the president got over his COVID thing. So there is hope that they're going to find a vaccine and that this is going to clear up, hopefully. Some kids will get upset or angry more quickly. That's what we call kind of response rate. They tend to jump at things. They tend to be agitated. Some will simply express their negative thoughts or worries that, what's going to happen with Christmas? What's going to happen? Is there going to be Halloween? Are we going to have Thanksgiving? Okay. I kind of listen to students or kids rather also when I'm in Walmart or places like that. And kids will talk about this kind of stuff. They'll appear restless, fidgety. So these are all what we call signs of anxiety. Some of these are normal reactions to this mess that we're in. okay? And we have had to adjust kind of overnight to this quarantine, pandemic, etc. There it is. There's that kid, and everybody's wearing masks. And I wonder what that kid is thinking. This is a kind of rhetorical or thought question. All these kids are wearing masks now. They're 6 feet apart. But what is that kid thinking? What are the thoughts going through his head? You know, he's trying to concentrate. He's trying to do his stuff, but he's worried. So we're trying to kind of get into the minds of some of these students and how they're coping and dealing with this entire dilemma or situation. Now, I talked earlier, sometimes you will find your children or other students sleeping a lot. Let me give you a generalization. It's just a generalization. Depressed people sleep a lot. That's their escape. For some kids, they're going to sleep a lot because maybe they worried the night before. So they're going to have a kind of rebound sleep later in the day. Okay. So you need to be sensitive. We want them to sleep at night and get good quality sleep. I do a little work with nurses, and they have real problems because they're working midnight to 8 in the morning, and they're going and doing double shifts. But the students will sometimes sleep inordinately. Parents may think that at first this is good, but then they're not getting quality sleep at night. Look at these poor kids. Boredom, school canceled, nothing to do. And what's happening is this gives them all time to think and ruminate. We don't want them just sitting there at the couch. I mean, look at those faces. You know, do those kids look happy to you? Some of you, I can see your faces. I see Mary Sanchez and a couple other people here. But I think that I'm kind of getting through. Let me move this little box here, which is another thing we always kind of have to do. But look at these poor kids. They're not getting the stimulation that they typically would get from a school. And in fact, even if they are gifted and in an enrichment program, they're not always getting very, very rich, robust education. I did a paper one year on how rich is your enrichment program, because we went in and we looked at schools and their quote unquote enrichment program, and we find out that they really don't do a lot of enrichment. They do a little higher order thinking skills, critical thinking skills, et cetera, but it's not really as rich as we would like for that kid in terms of challenging them, and particularly for their IQ. Here's a kid crying. They miss their friends. Now, guys, here is where you guys as teachers and parents need to use your very, very best, calmest, most therapeutic voice. Here is where you're going to be somewhat Rogerian and try to reassure this poor little girl that things are going to get better. And then she cries even louder. She is feeling what we call big emotions or big feelings. She doesn't understand this mask. She doesn't understand what's going on necessarily, because she may not have the intellectual capacity that a high school kid might have. Does that make sense? I talked earlier about LFT. Thank you. We're getting some thumbs up that I'm getting across. Here's this poor kid, and I don't know whether he's trying to do quadratic equations or algebra or whatever, but this is the frustration of the student at home trying to figure out the answer to some problem. You remember those story problems that we used to get when we were in high school? Train leaves New York, traveling at 65 miles an hour. Another train leaves San Francisco, traveling at 80 miles an hour. When do they intersect in Omaha, Nebraska? Well, here's this poor kid trying to figure this word problem out without the help of a teacher, or maybe the parent doesn't even know how to deal with the problem. So we got to Zoom the teacher or send the teacher an email or text an email. But the problem is that a lot of students do not have what we call the frustration tolerance that they really need to work with this situation. Okay? They have what we call LFT, and it's understandable, low frustration tolerance, and it's driving them crazy because they have nobody, so to speak, to turn to. Does this make sense? Let's see if we get some, what do you call it, thumbs up. We call this engagement. Thank you, Deborah. Okay, here's the question. Does he miss school or is he frustrated? Does he miss his friends or does he miss his teacher? Is he banging his head against the wall? Hopefully not. I just chose some of these pictures to kind of exemplify some of the emotional states that these gifted kids and kids in general are going through, and that you now have to be prepared to cope with. Okay? Now, even young kids, they get mad. Look at this poor kid. You know, he's got to wear the mask. He's got to stay home, and the dogs are barking, and mom is trying to work, or dad is trying to work. So anger. Now, guys, the real problem is this. Anger is one of these emotions that people are really uncomfortable with. They don't have a lot of coping skills to deal with. Now, sometimes there are instances of what we call just anger. From about 8:30 to 10:30, there was no sudden link access. So I'm angry and perturbed at Suddenlink. I've been angry and perturbed at Suddenlink since around Labor Day because the service is lousy. I hope I don't get sued for this, but I've been really angry at the lack of, Deborah, you're laughing at all this, so you must be able to relate. Okay. Now, is there tension or anxiety? One of the real problems is that the kid is trying to learn, dad is trying to teach, and the kid might really prefer to be out playing. And there is a difference between tension and anxiety. We have math anxiety, we have test anxiety, we just have generalized kind of anxiety. And here the kid looks a little bit tired. Because you can only put kids on this Zoom thing for so long. You can only put them online for so long before they want to eat or go to McDonald's or something like that. I went to McDonald's. They told me I didn't deserve a break today. They didn't want to see me smile. They wanted to see me leave. I got no, there we go. Okay, here's distance learning, day 4. And this kid, look at this kid. He's kind of given up on this Zoom thing. I don't know what he's listening to, but he's trying to make the most of this whole situation. Now, he's got a little office. The parents at least are prepared, for this kid. I don't know where his chair is, but he's got a little office of his own, and he's kind of, making the best of the situation. So this is the kind of stuff we're dealing with. Okay, now I'm throwing out at you some pictures, but I've also got to throw out some intellectual stuff. Many gifted youngsters have a heightened sensitivity to their surroundings, to events, to ideas, and to expectations. Some experience their own high expectations for achievement as a relentless pressure to excel. They have this constant striving to live up to self-expectations or those of others. They want to be first, they want to be best, or both, and this can be very stressful. For gifted kids, with every new course, every new teacher, or new school, questions arise in their little minds about achievement and performance. Since every new situation carries with it The frightening risk of being mediocre. I'm going to repeat that. The frightening risk of being mediocre. Let that sink in. Striving becomes even more stressful when unrealistic or unclear expectations are imposed by adults or teachers or peers. There's this pressure to excel, accompanied by other conditions or such as feeling different. They feel different. They know that they are different. They understand that there's something different about them. Some have this self-doubt, what we call the imposter syndrome. And then they have this need to prove their giftedness. We'll talk about needs later, but this need to prove their giftedness. Now, guys, this is draining their emotional energy out of them. And this results in all kind of additional stress. Sometimes you have to take the time to absorb all this stuff. Okay, and it's not easy unless you're really working with gifted kids, on a kind of ongoing basis. Now, one approach to this whole mess, and I'm going to give you a couple of different approaches, okay? One approach is the logical, rational, reasonable, calm approach, okay? And I'm an EMT part-time. I got training in EMT years ago. I'm on call. I'm on standby. That's how bad things are, okay? That they're going to try to drag me, to the hospital or to an ambulance to help transport. But this, in all seriousness, and I did AED training this summer and CPR and first aid and everything else to hone my skills, because that's the level of seriousness of this. There is a serious bug, germ, bacteria, virus out there, and the ICUs are filled. Some individuals get quite sick, particularly those with pre-existing conditions. And here's where you can reassure your students that, well, you don't have lung cancer, you don't have asthma or hay fever or allergies or emphysema. So you're kind of safe, but you still want to wear the mask and stay 6 feet away. This is not rocket science surgery, guys. Okay? Wear the mask, stay 6 feet away, and disinfect and wash your hands. Because some individuals do get quite sick. We have to maintain, that should be maintained, what we now call social distance. We don't want this thing to spread. You can use the word contagious and explain what the word is. We have to wash our hands, use disinfectant. We will get through this, but we have to learn to cope. And things are going to be slightly different, very different for a while. And maybe by next year, things will be better. Want to kind of remind you about a guy named Abraham Maslow and what we call basic needs. America's kids need us now more than ever. That's from First Lady Melania Trump. And we need to kind of refocus on what kids need. They need some security. They need some reassurance. They need to be taught how to cope. Some need comfort and solace and nurturance. And we'll get to this a little bit later. And the real problem is you guys, as teachers and parents, you're already stressed and anxious. There's a lot of teachers, worried about, am I going to have to give students, grades? What if I give the kid an F? I have a mother and she's in contact with me, and the student apparently is failing 3 classes. And she's bearing the brunt of this stress and anxiety. Now, I know that we have 39 people. Don't try to leave, but I got to warn you. I don't care if my PowerPoint presentation has 320 slides. You are staying until it's over. This is a kind of my feeble attempt to make you understand that it's not going to be all PowerPoints, but we're going to interspece some discussion of this with some humor. This is what we call a humor warning. Some people don't have a sense of humor. I try to use or insert a little fun, humor, mirth, frivolity, maybe even a joke or two into the presentation to keep you guys awake. Okay, Molly, thank you very much. Now, humor can help in this situation. There's also a lot of research on humor, fun, mirth, frivolity to help people cope with adversity. Okay. Now, by the same token, COVID-19, which evolved from SARS. I don't know how many of you are familiar with SARS, but I got trained in SARS when it first appeared. SARS is a kind of precursor. Now, with gifted kids, we give them a little information about SARS, and you can go online if the kid wants to learn a little bit more about SARS, which is the precursor of the coronavirus. It's a dangerous virus which can take the lives of many with various conditions, particularly the elderly, because their immune system is not great. This is what we call, guys, an educative approach. Okay, I talked about the logical, rational, reasonable approach. This is an educative approach. We're going to educate them on maybe the off chance that maybe they're going to be doctors or nurses or x-ray technicians or physicians later on down the road. I think that this is going to impact a lot of people, and people are going to start thinking about going into medicine. Again, main thing about the anxiety factor is this uncertainty. Never before has an entire nation been so unsure of the future. And I've been around, you can tell by my gray hair how long I've been around, but right now we're going through this thing of Trump versus this Biden guy, and people are uncertain. They want that leadership. Okay, and will this new guy provide it, or do we stick with, Trump and his tweets and all that? Uncertainty, time issues in their little minds. How long is this going to last? A lot of long-term uncertainties about the economy. If you're a waiter or a waitress, or your parents are a waiter or a waitress, you're in real trouble. And a lot of other people have lost, I think, the Suddenlink. I think they fired all those technicians. And now we can't get Suddenlink service. Preoccupation with the negatives. They're thinking about the bad stuff. They're thinking about people getting sick. And we kind of want to be a little bit optimistic. We hope for the best, but sometimes we have to expect the worst, that we're going to be wearing these masks for a long period of time. Now, for parents and even teachers, this is an opportunity for what we call attitude formation, that we're going to be confronted with problems in the future, and we need to learn how to cope and deal with problems. We're going to let that sink in. Some of you know some of the work about resilience. This is a great opportunity for parents and teachers to teach resilience, that you have the coping skills to deal with this crisis. And also bear in mind, or keep in mind, that we're trying to cope with something that most of you guys have never experienced. I haven't experienced a pandemic or an epidemic like this. I didn't, fight in World War II, so I don't have any real experience about being on the front lines. I didn't do time in Vietnam, although I talked to a lot of people who tell me about it. Okay, anxiety, some more of the signs and symptoms: the irritability, overthinking. Things are going to get worse, much worse, much worse. Hypervigilance. Now, you'll get this in gifted kids. What's going to go wrong next? And the other problem is kids watch TV and they see all these burnings and shootings and lootings. And even up in Santa Fe, they tore down that obelisk. Who's from Santa Fe out there? We got any Santa Fe people? Nobody from Santa Fe. Everybody's from Las Cruces. That's okay. Okay. Obsessive thoughts. Some kids will avoid talking about this at all. I've had kids talk to me about they think that there's going to be people dying in the streets. Let me move this thing again. Sleep difficulties. Now, I mean, who here has not lost sleep since March? Is there anybody out there who can say that they've slept a full 8 hours? Okay. You will get kids with headaches. In fact, dealing with this Zoom and moving these boxes and windows around kind of gives me a headache. Breathing difficulties, which is related to anxiety. There's a great piece by a guy named Don Wynn who talks about gifted kids and their fear of losing control. They have no control over this mess. They may have had control back in the school, in the classroom, but they have no control over having to wear a mask. You got to wear the mask in Walmart. And some will report what we call racing thoughts. I've had a lot of gifted kids talk to me this was years ago, and they use the metaphor of their mind is like a 45 record going at 78, that it's kind of speeded up and going all the time. Some of you may be able to relate to that. Others of you are CD people. Now, key concern, almost therapeutically, is there a recognition on the part of teachers? Do teachers really understand what gifted kids and kids in general are going through experiencing? Does anybody really understand missing friends and peer group and socializing with peers? Do parents, teachers understand the aggravation and stress that gifted kids are dealing with trying to learn at home? For example, their lives have been pretty much ripped asunder. I got to tell you, at the university, these kids that are athletes that have been in the music program, theater, arts, social activities, their lives have been ripped asunder. We have a couple on suicide watch. We have some on medication because, you know, they come to college to play basketball, to sing, to play the flute, to be on theater, to be on stage. And now they're doing all this online Zoom stuff. Big problem, schools, are they really prepared to cope? Were they really prepared to cope? Probably not. Nobody could have really predicted this thing. For gifted kids, number one, loss of control, we talked about. Impotence, they can't do anything. Anger about having to sit at home and their lives have been disrupted of what should have been a pleasant experience. For a lot of kids, school is life. They can't wait. I mean, I visit guidance counselors during the summer and I see these kids all around the school and they can't wait to get back to school. They're eager to talk to, you know, their friends and teachers. It's a great experience for a lot of kids. The school climate is great. Okay. Stress. Before COVID-19, things were stressful enough. Now gifted kids are dealing with stressed out parents and teachers. And I've already told you, but this bears repeating, gifted kids are more sensitive than others. They pick up on the feelings and the emotions of parents. And if they're smart, really intelligent, gifted kids are probably more fearful of COVID-19, and as they may have read about it, and they know about bacteria, virology, etc. Communication, another way of coping that parents may need to learn about. You've got to allocate adequate amounts of time to discuss anxiety, loss of control, exasperation, and the unrealistic expectations of you're going to be learning algebra at home. Allocate time to discuss what's going on in the world, riots, fires, destruction, death, response, political skullduggery, and then have to be aware of other outlets for anxiety. What's happening, I mean, I've never had, in my past life, I've never had a nightmare where people are sticking swabs up my nose. This is a new experience for me to get these nasal swabs. And I've tested negative, so that's a good thing. Some kids will resort to energy drinks to try to get through the day. And discussing feelings is difficult for some kids, difficult for some parents. The parents are already stressed out. You will get a thing called anhedonia. The child will report a lack of pleasure in things that used to give them pleasure. It's an inability to get pleasure from what used to give us pleasure. So the kid used to like to go to Pizza Hut or McDonald's or whatever, but now it doesn't seem to have any interest for them. That's kind of a bad sign. It's a kind of mild depression. So we have stress in an already stressful world. Key issues: fear, lack of understanding what's going on, lack of structure, and then this placement of continual expectations that learning is somehow going to continue. How much these kids are going to be learning, I don't know. You're going to have a lot of students returning to school maybe next year or next fall, and I don't know about their reading comprehension, reading rate, math, etc. Some schools, there's continual chaos, there's frustration, and there's no easy answers or solutions. We're going to have to muddle through this as best we can. Compassion. You want to communicate, allow for catharsis, let them talk about what they're feeling, give them time. We need to be optimistic. We're going to get through this. We need to downplay the negative, and we can look at what we can appreciate. It brings the family together. We can now talk a little bit about this, that, or the other thing. In a sense, it's kind of a mini vacation, but it's a stressful vacation. I talked earlier about needs. We need to validate as to what's transpired. It's been difficult. Need to recognize what's going on in the world. Need to recognize our loss of control over everything. Need to be reassured that at some point in the future, things will get better. I'm already planning for spring break next year. Little bit of a need for perspective. The rest of the world is also dealing with this. I heard from the Netherlands, and they're going to go into complete total lockdown again. Okay, I don't know what's going on in Italy or Great Britain. I have contacts in London, but they're going through this too. And we need to understand, or kids need to understand, just how dangerous this thing is. People die. And students and children need to understand we're trying to protect ourselves. Now, for your more intelligent, gifted kids, we need to give them time to think at home. How are physics and chemistry related to each other? I do a little work with the science department, and they do some science things and physics for their high achieving students. Remember catharsis. People want to talk. This is, gosh, so important. They want to talk. They want to be heard. They want to be listened to and understood. You guys need to recognize what we call LFT, low frustration tolerance. That for some kids, this is their first real experience with a very exasperating, frustrating event, and we need to validate this and say that we understand. And I use this phrase all the time. It's from Alfred Adler originally. We are all in this together. I was corrected by one of my students who told me that no, it was Zac Efron who said it in Cheers. I've never met that guy. Okay, got to move on. Now, again, I try to use a little bit of humor. Don't do this at home. But this kind of exemplifies the frustration of the parent. Mom has to work at home, and the kid is always interrupting. Don't do this, okay? It's a joke, fun, humor, mirth, frivolity, okay? It's a joke. But switching gears, touch, warmth, caring, compassion, concern. Here's this poor kid trying to figure this out, and all she really wants to do is be held. You can see from this picture and feel the pain and what the kid is going through. We have to almost train you to be little mini therapists, if you will. Okay, thank you. If this whole mess continues, we need to adjust and make a kind of transition. Take a deep breath. We need to allocate time to unwind and de-stress. Expectations are going to have to be modified educationally, socially, interpersonally. A lot of relationships going to have to be healed. Guys, in spite of Zoom and Skype and all these other things, there is no replacement for face-to-face contact. I meet with people in the McDonald's parking lot. Okay? They're in one car, I'm in the other, we're 6 feet apart, but there's no substitute for hearing a human voice. Now, the Zoom does good on the hearing a human voice, but seeing that person is kind of important. Religion, I don't want to get on a soapbox or anything like that, and I certainly don't want to offend anybody, but all kinds of issues come up with religion and being able to worship. Or you see, for some families, that Sunday is an anchor. You need to understand that that's one consistency in their lives. For some men, going for coffee and donuts and Danish and pastries, that's a big deal of their lives. Okay, this is called facetiousness for those of you who, if it goes over your head. Okay, how big a problem is this? Well, we have to gauge it. Well, here's a real problem. The sign says loose gravel. You think about little itty bitty rocks. Well, shucks, look at the size of this boulder that's come down. This is a much bigger problem than a lot of people attribute it to. With gifted kids, you'll hear this thing called what we call awfulizing. Repeated reflections, comments, concerns that things are terrible, awful, horrible. Well, yes, times are difficult, but we tend to make them worse by awfulizing or ruminating or repeating or what we call perseverating, continually reflecting on how bad things are. And also this continual monitoring of TV viewing, that's not necessarily helpful either. Deep breath, guys. We may be in this for a very long time. I don't want to be, the bad guy here, but things don't look good in terms of the numbers. And like I say, I hear from Albuquerque and Santa Fe. I have friends and colleagues in the ICUs and EMTs even here in Portales and Clovis. I used to play basketball with those guys. No more basketball. They're busy, with ICU. Clinically, we are in what we call, for these children, an adjustment reaction of what we want to call childhood or adolescent or adulthood. We're in a transient situational disorder. If you're not familiar with Dabrowski, you need to get familiar with him, particularly if you're working with gifted kids, and understand that gifted kids feel more intensely. They worry more intensely. Molly, thank you. They are more immediate in terms of reaction. They can be much more emotional and reactive. So if you're not familiar with his theory of positive disintegration, they're being challenged and they have to grow and develop from this. Empathy and understanding and intensity. A great book. I think one of the sponsors of the conference is the person who did this Rainforest People. I think it's Paula Prober. I don't know if she's out there or if anybody has heard of her, but excellent book. I'm going to kind of shift gears now. Molly, thank you. Rainforest people is a kind of great understanding or conceptualization that with understanding comes calm. Once we understand it, then we get a little bit calmer. Are you all familiar with sad fishing? Raise your hands. Sad fishing. Mary, no. Got to warn you. On social media, a lot of these students will seek the reassurance, nurturance, solitude, and understanding that they do not get from parents. Some others are going to join in on this social media stuff because kind of misery loves company. What's happening is they're looking for their emotional needs to get met online that aren't met in the school or at home. Even adults do it, but in a little bit different ways. And I may be anachronistic here with this sad fishing. Maybe it's passe by now. Okay, here is what we call more of an intellectual approach, where we get the kid to learn about. If the kid's gifted, well, he gets to learn about anthrax, measles, rubella, cholera, meningococcal disease, hepatitis, tetanus, all these other things. I'm not going to bore you with all this, but this is what parents have sometimes thrown at the kids so that they learn about this coronavirus. Again, emotions never before experienced. When little people are overwhelmed with big emotions, guys, it's our job to share our calm and not to join their chaos. And I don't know exactly how old this kid is, but a little bit of teaching about emotions, anger, anticipation, joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness, disgust. So we have a gamut of emotions that gifted kids are experiencing. More basic emotions, anxiety. We talked about test anxiety, math anxiety, separation anxiety. Now we have COVID-19 anxiety. Death anxiety. Grandmother was taken to the hospital. What's going to happen? And we have this pervasive sense of hopelessness and fear going on. And here's a great book, When My Worries Get Too Big, relaxation book for children who live with anxiety. You have some kids who are living with anxiety, and you can try to pick up that book. I'm not promoting it, but it's a good kind of resource. Relaxation helps kids feel better, but not necessarily think better or cope better in either the short term or long term. A lot of people will jump out at this mindfulness thing. Yes, we want kids to relax, but we also want them to learn how to cope with difficulty. Here's some quick things on managing the big emotions. Take deep breaths, count to 10, go calm down in a calm place. It's not okay to hurt anybody. Use my words to express feelings. That's the biggest challenge. Ask for help or a hug from an adult. Here's that poor kid. She's still crying. She's still crying. So we want to do a feeling check-in. How do you feel right now? I don't know where you guys are all right now. Maybe you're over here. Maybe you're over here with questions at the chat. How are things going at school? I have some kids and they do an A, B, C, D type of hybrid model. They go to school Monday, Wednesday, or Thursday and Friday, and the rest is online. How are things going at home? How are your friendships going? These are all things, what we call grist for the mill. I talked earlier about comfort, consolation. The kid just needs a hug. Kid just needs to be reassured. Comfort food. Some of you may have put on a few pounds during this epidemic or pandemic. I know that I've been eating at McDonald's or Burger King. They told me at Burger King I couldn't have things my way. I had to take it as it was. But I got to tell you, I have some of this. I have some of this stuff. This is great stuff for, talk about comfort food. We need comfort food. I go to these meetings. I say, where's the pastries? Where's the donuts? No pastries, no donuts. What kind of meeting is this? These IEPs, where is the donuts? Where's the pastries? Okay. If you ask me, I'll send you some of these links. Help on YouTube. There's a guy named Dr. Jeff Zieg. Here's a couple more YouTubes. This is interesting. Happiness chemicals and how to hack them. You want more dopamine in your brain? Complete a task, do self-care, eat food, celebrate little wins. Serotonin, the mood stabilizer, meditating, running, lying out in the sun, walking in nature, swimming, cycling. Oxytocin, playing with a dog, playing with a baby, holding hands, hugging your family, giving compliments. Painkiller, endorphins, laughter, essential oils, watch a comedy, watch stuff on YouTube, dark chocolate, one of my favorites, and exercising. I like this one, playing with a dog. I talk to my dog as a therapist. Here's another YouTube thing. I'll send you if you want. Here's kids' sadness about COVID-19. They may have anger. They want to resist this new order or this new normal. They're tired all the time. They just want to numb out. They want to do those video games. They will displace their frustration, and they're bored. And I'm bored is a code for I'm sad. Now, almost over. It's important to let your kids struggle. Struggle leads to growth. This is building problem-solving skills. Teaches kids to manage their emotions. They use this superhero thing a lot. We want them to struggle enough, but not too much. Struggling fosters a good growth mindset. Carol Dweck writes about mindset. And we're teaching them self-regulation. I told you earlier about how I talk to my dog. Here's my emotional support dog after I get done telling it about all my problems. The dog is my kind of therapist. He looks at me like I got two heads. Guys, there's often a roller coaster of emotion. Things change from day to day, positive, negative, good news to bad news. I mean, who could have predicted that the president would get COVID? He's in this bubble, they're going to try to keep him safe, and he gets COVID-19, and his wife and his kid. Going to slow down for 1 minute. The roller coaster is real in terms of emotions. Take a deep breath. And here's a woman who has lost maybe her husband or son or daughter to COVID. This is what I mean about the depth and breadth of human emotion and how deeply, and the whole roller coaster gamut of emotion. And children have lost loved ones. I have one family right now, both mom and dad are in the hospital. And we're looking in on the children, delivering pizza. We're having pizza delivered. Okay, some parents use distraction as a coping mechanism. It works well in the short run. It helps students use time productively. It disrupts what we call the thought processes. Many disruptions or distractions have long-term benefit, like exercise, religion, reading. I have this one gifted kid, and she's reading Sharon Messenger. How many are familiar with Sharon Messenger and the Keeper of the Lost Cities? It's the newest thing since Harry Potter. They're all eating these books like there's no tomorrow. Very, very thick books. Sharon Messenger and these Keeper of the Cities of Lost something or other. Very, very thick books. And these kids are all eating them up like there's no tomorrow. Okay, many distractions can help kids plan for the future. Gives them time to think about it. Here's a kid with crayon, and you can see he's a little bit angry. All you have to do is look at what he's writing with this crayon. And kids can express their emotions through art, painting. They can vent. This is a good distraction hobby, catharsis, ventilation, and can turn into a lifelong endeavor. Parents have to self-reflect. How are they coping? How are they doing? How are they managing with working at home, paying bills, doing the laundry, teaching their own children? How are they getting their own needs met? I have to ask myself. And here's the big wrap up. How am I doing personally? Well, here's a picture of how I'm doing personally. Whoops. There's my email. They have my name misspelled in the thing, but that's okay. You just have to add a GH, and it's at enmu.edu. But to end the thing, how am I doing? I'm holding up just fine. How about you? How are you doing?
Thank you, Michael. This was wonderful. We have several questions.
Okay.
Two of them that kind of fit together. Jenna asked, what does anxiety look like in teens and what are some things to do with it? And Kim asked, do you have any suggestions on books about living with anxiety for adolescents to read?
Wow. Well, in the presentation, I mentioned some anxiety books in the slide presentation. It depends on how insightful the adolescents are. I'd have to think about a good book. You probably want to start with what I would call basic escapism, and evaluate how intense the anxiety is, and then what the causal factors of the anxiety are, and start with a basic question of, what's the matter?
Okay.
You want to find out what their main thing is, or even get them to list 1, 2, 3, 4, their top 2 or 3 concerns. I can't think of a good for anxiety book for adolescents, but if they shoot me an email, I'll try to dig around. There's that thing by Don Wynn I mentioned, and the Rainforest People.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just type into the internet Rainforest People. Oh, it's Paula Prober.
Yeah.
Paula.
The Rainforest Mind. The Rainforest Mind.
The Rainforest Mind. That's a good one.
It's your Rainforest Mind.
Your Rainforest Mind. That's a good one. See, I'm often kind of cautious. Is it a boy or a girl that's having the anxiety? Because they manifest the anxiety a little bit differently.
What about
girls? A little more verbal.
Okay. And before, sorry, I want to jump in with one more before our time ends.
Yeah.
Mary asks, what's a good way to explain to our students and parents that the world has had this happen once before with the Spanish flu, and that, you know what, we survived. It was a pandemic. Everybody wore masks. They socially distanced, and life eventually went on.
Yeah, I've gone onto the internet and I've picked up pictures of, 1910, where you have all these people lying in hospitals. I mean, I've actually gotten pictures from the Civil War where they have makeshift ambulances. And you show these pictures of the makeshift ambulances from the Civil War. And you show pictures of what it was like in 1910, and pictures I've seen of even football games where they're all wearing masks. So go online, use the internet. In fact, I was talking to a parent yesterday, and the kids are bored. And I said to the parent, well, take them to London or Paris or Rome. And the mother, must have thought I was crazy, but we start with Google Maps and we take them to London and Paris and Rome. Then we go online to YouTube and we take them to London and Paris and Rome. And then we take them to, and I've got about 100 different museums all around the world that they can take their kid to: the Prado, to the Louvre, to the National Gallery. We want to take them out and use this time to help them explore the world and not be doing this, games and stuff like that. We don't want them playing solitaire because they're not getting anything out of solitaire. I have younger kids, and I can send you a PowerPoint or a sheet of paper with all of the ways to learn about dinosaurs. Young kids love to learn about Tyrannosaurus Rex and all this stuff. So I can send you a list of how to access stuff about dinosaurs.
So Michael, I want to thank you for everything you shared with us this morning.